Our school journal, the Tool Mountain Record, which the children began to print when we got our school, carried every bit of news in the neighborhood. In looking back through the old copies, which I've always kept, I found some interesting and amusing items which had been almost forgotten. This story appears in one of the papers. The cowboys had great fun in playing practical jokes on one another, but they especially loved to have a joke on a new cowhand. In this instance, they had driven a bunch of steers to town, and as it was a long drive, they took along the chuck wagon and the camp cook, whose name was Jones. It naturally followed that his nickname was Casey Jones. While in town, they hired a new hand, a big Dutchman named Spider, who rode home in the wagon with Casey. They told Spider, he never went by any other name, that Casey was subject to fits after he'd been in town drinking, and they gave him a bottle of medicine composed of tea and vinegar, telling him to force the liquid down Casey's throat if he should throw a fit. Next they drew Casey aside and told him to throw a fit so that they could have a little fun scaring Spider. About 10 miles out in the desert, Casey threw the fit, and Spider, according to the others, advanced on Casey with the bottle. A hard struggle ensued. The Dutchman was the stronger man, and he downed Casey, hog-tied him, and forced every drop of the medicine down his throat. The rest of the boys managed to overtake them, and Casey didn't have to ride hog-tied very long. The next day they turned the tables and played a joke on Spider. While branding some new bulls, they turned the last one loose while Spider stood nearby. When the bull charged him, he stood his ground, waving his hands and shouting at the animal, "Wait! Wait a minute! Wait now!" The boys were all yelling at him to run, and finally he took their advice. Just as he reached the fence, the bull knocked him down. One of the boys reached under the fence and pulled him to safety. He got up, a very angry Spider, and wanted to fight the whole bunch of cowboys. They laughingly told him it was just a joke. "Yoke!" yelled the Dutchman. "You call that a yoke?" Another article in the Record. The cowboy boss, who came with 4 mules and a chuck wagon, picked up the teacher and Alice and Jessie, who are now 13 and 15 years of age, and took them to a dance across Tool Mountain at Fish Springs Ranch. There was a high summit to cross, and it was snowing when they left home, but thinking it to be just a small flurry, they started in plenty of time to make the 25-mile distance before nightfall. They had no trouble in getting there, but the storm continued, and they stayed at the ranch until the storm was over. The snow was so deep on the summit that they had to drive 80 miles around the foot of the mountain to get home. They lost 3 days of school, which had to be made up by the end of term. In the spring, I supplemented our meat supply by raising bum lambs. When an old ewe has twin lambs and has milk enough only for one, she butts the others away from her and won't let it come near her again. The sheepherder either has to kill the lamb or give it away. One can acquire any number of bummers during lambing time. It took me a long time to learn the formula to feed them, and Minnie's a pet lamb I have cried over losing. The following is an illustrated item which appeared in the Record, written by Leslie, who was then only 10. Item: the sheep rant at Tool is slowly but surely increasing and decreasing. The death list for the night of April 11th was one dearly beloved Fluff, dead of pneumonia, and for April 13th, Goshi and Milkman, mourned by Jesse Olds, will long be remembered among the angels. Starting in the new school year, this poem appeared in the Record, written by Leslie. On this September 21st, we start a brand new year and welcome Tool Record with loud hurrahs and cheer. With grins that stretch from ear to ear, eyes bright with happy tears, we'll start the Record once again, dear diary of the years. Some of the cowboys were pretty fair poets, and they often brought their own contributions to our paper. We had a reading of the paper one evening every 2 weeks, and all the cowboys would attend, sometimes riding 30 or 40 miles to listen to each other's literary efforts. The teacher at Dry Valley School brought her children for the social evening, and they often had contributions in our journal as well. The cowboy boss had quite a case on our schoolmarm, and one of the boys was poetically inclined, set this to poem. Ode to a Cowboy. Here's to the PF Buckaroo boss, rider of fame. I guess you all know him, Bucko's his name. He can throw a big loop way up in the air, and at busting wild broncs he's always there. He's now going to school at the Olds farm. Of course, an education will do him no harm. But he started to win the schoolmom's heart with a span of wild mules and a breaking cart. How he's making out we don't quite know, but we're inclined to think he's a little bit slow. For the other day we heard by chance that this schoolmom's lover is over in France. But nonetheless, if he's made a mistake, he can always go back to Honey Lake, to his desert girl who's waiting there with her freckled face and her bright red hair. The poem brought quite a laugh, for all the boys had managed to be there. Needless to say, it didn't bring a smile to the teacher. It was too true. Another article contributed by the cowboys was illustrated by Alice, and it went like this. Extra, Mr. Rudolph Bucko, riding near Nixon, reached the banks of the Truckee River just in time to save the life of a drowning cowboy. Only for Mr. Bucko's presence of mind and very skillful roping, both horse and rider would have drowned. Joe Overalls, chief of the Indian tribe, has awarded Mr. Bucko a medal for his heroic bravery. From a reader. Our evenings spent reading the Tool Mountain Record reminded me of the country literary societies that we had back in Iowa when I was a girl. As long as we had children in school, the Tool Mountain Record continued to be published, and I cherish it to this day. As recorded in our journal, I raised bummer lambs for our summer's meat. A big sheep ranch below us afforded us as many lambs as we could raise, which was usually 10 or 12. If I raised more than we needed, I could always sell the surplus. We had to do a lot of scheming in order to have lamb to eat, for the children made pets of every one, naming them, and each one choosing one special lamb for their own particular pet. They were very dear little animals, and the children would not allow any of them to be killed. Finally, we derived a plan, with old Goshi's help, so that we could have lamb to eat without killing the children's pets. We would trade our lamb for a field lamb that Goshi had raised. We left all our lambs at his ranch, and he would kill and dress some of his lambs and trade them for ours. It was a wonderful scheme, for our children could always go down to Goshi's and play with their pets. After the lambs were grown and turned out in the range with a band of sheep, the children would go into the band of sheep and call the name of their own pet. They couldn't recognize their own animal after it was full grown, but the lambs never forgot the children. They would call, "Here, Fluff, here, Speckles," and out would come a full-grown sheep to love and be petted.
And I feel like New York City. Get me to the farm.